negotiation pop-up discussion this time as opposed to a practice. And the whole idea is that we're going to be discussing some elements of negotiation, basically how to improve our negotiation skills. Now, I do have my friend, Mike Inman, who is from TableForce, a very professional negotiation training firm based in the States, but globally delivering their services, I might add.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Phil, can we do one system check? I've got our LinkedIn page, LinkedIn Live up, and it still says we're pre-live.
Yeah, it will do. There's about an 18-second delay.
Got it.
Which reminds me, that means we need to start 18 seconds early. You know what? You only learn by doing some of these things,
You got to practice in a safe environment.
Okay, well, let's talk about that, Mike, all right? Because obviously you've been in this game for quite a while. I've been doing this for quite a while. For me, practice is super important for any types of skills, for any type of development. So I want to ask, to kick this off, I'm going to ask you a question, which is basically, when it comes to negotiation practice, what would you consider to be perhaps the best and the worst forms of practice, if there was one?
Yeah. I think people need to do more. They need to go to practice sessions such as yourself. They need to seek them out. They don't present themselves naturally. I mean, I have a deck of your cards right here that I have, and I've done with my daughter and my friends. I have here's an example from our sessions. We've got a role play case that we built out based on a real world negotiation, and those are what I'll call a safe learning environment situation. You can try things and be awkward and fail and not get fired. But I also think people need to negotiate in the real world more. They how do you find a supplier if you're a procurement person who there's very low risk in, if something goes sideways, it won't really hurt the relationship that much. And you call them in and say, hey, listen, I'd like to renegotiate this deal. Do you have any thoughts? How could we do this better? We've been doing this for 6 months. Now that we know more about each other, is there anything in this deal that we should relook at? And be willing to have that soft negotiation before you go into the renewal negotiation with a critical supplier that if something fails, it could shut down the production line. You better be a competent negotiator before you go into something like that. So I think getting out and negotiating more is the best way to become a better negotiator.
Okay, so one way of doing that is to go out into real world negotiations, perhaps those types of scenarios which are not high risk, not going to put your career at risk, so to speak. Yeah. So that's one way of doing it. What about other ways which are even safer, perhaps, where you're not going out into real world negotiations? Are there other methods of actually developing practice?
Yeah, well, one thing I learned from you, Phil, is how easy it can be to negotiate over something like apples and take a tactic and try and practice it. But then with my daughter the other day, she said, what are those cards? And I said, oh, these are negotiation cards. You want to do a negotiation? And I had a blast bonding with my daughter over negotiating over these fake apples. And you can do it with friends, that don't know much about negotiating even. Or you can do it with somebody who's a really good negotiator, and they might learn something and you might learn from them. I could see this being like when couples get together, instead of playing a normal card game, break out negotiating cards, or instead of playing Monopoly, let's negotiate some deals. It could be done anywhere, anytime.
Can I just add to that? I think what you've just also mentioned there is the fact that whereas there are certain things you can practice on, I went to a public speaking club ended up being there for 4 years, but you can do that on your own.
Speech.
Yeah, it's a very long
speech. I'm long-winded.
It's a long negotiation. But in those scenarios, you could be said, right, I could go away and practice for a couple of weeks on my own, even if it was just standing in front of a mirror and just, presenting myself. But when it comes to negotiation practice, negotiation is very much an interaction. So the reality is you need to be able to negotiate at least with someone or perhaps something.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that. I've been exploring AI for about a year now. When it first popped, I thought I was going to be on the forefront. And what I found was there are people that are already way surfing the wave on the forefront. So there's some good stuff in AI that's out there, but there's some bad stuff too that I've experienced, and it's fascinating. JN has set up a situation on a web page where you can negotiate with Obama, Trump, Mother Teresa, and it's a little simple negotiating practice with a bot, if you will.
Right.
But it's a little bit, I'm going to say wonky. It's a little bit broken. For example,
Why can't I hear you? Your microphone's gone. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Oh, the lovely situation of broadcasting live. So I think where Mike was going at with the AI side.
Am I back? Am I back?
You are back now. You must
had a call come in. So where I was going is I approached it as I wanted to understand how you're programmed without saying how you're programmed. So I asked it some things about what type of logic are you using? For example, what I said was if we're negotiating over dollar and either each of us gets something or we both get nothing, is 10 cents better than nothing? And the algorithms all said, yes, 10 cents is better than nothing. Got it. So then I said, I'll give you 10 cents. And none of them would accept the 10 cents. They also had a hard time making counter offers. They wanted me to make the offer. So in my brain, with the searching that I did, the probing that I did, the logic questions that I did, someone had programmed behind the scenes, do not accept a deal worse than 50 cents, 40 cents, some number. So no matter how logical I made the argument, because the math didn't fit the filter, it wouldn't accept the deal, even though it agreed that it would have been a good deal and it would have been silly to walk away.
All right. Maybe there's a bit of an issue here because it might be worth defining what we're trying to practice as well. So for me, when it comes to practicing any skills, it's the individual skills as much as anything else. So, putting forward a proposal is part of the negotiation process, but there's many other aspects that you need to practice. Just as simple as asking a question. You asked a question there of the AI. It gave you an answer. Didn't necessarily help you in your negotiation, so to speak, and it might behave differently to the way that humans behave. But there is a multitude of skins. There's a multitude of skills that need to be practiced. So with an AI, I mean, I would say right now, AI is fledgling. It's developing. It will get there, no doubt. Absolutely no doubt it will get to a position where you can practice your negotiation skills. I just wonder whether it's going to be accessible and really have the benefits for individuals. But that's one way to practice, isn't it? We want to talk about different ways.
But don't
one
get off
way
this
is
topic.
with an AI.
Let's before you get off. There's I'm having a fierce internet debate with a person that you may have seen our exchanges, Phil, about neuroscience and neurolinguistic programming, which are very different. They're different things. There's some overlap.
Yep.
And about how all decisions are neuroscience, emotional, irrational based, which I agree they are all based on that. However, I believe strongly that there is a range in that emotion. When a person on a bridge who's had a bad day, who got fired, who lost their spouse, who's something bad, their brain is hyper emotional, hyper irrational. It's going on different cylinders than a person who has 5 blow mold injection suppliers, and part of their job is to make sure all 5 have some portion of the business, to have backup plans. And it's kind of a commodity part, and anyone can really make them. So that person is going to be more objective. Who's closer to the plant? Who has better quality? Who has better delivery? And our finance says this is the best supplier. I think those are two very different, on the scale of irrationality, of emotions, of neuroscience. I think they're very different. And it hasn't been studied in B2B cases that I've seen. They just took they took the premise that all decisions are emotional and they applied it to B2B without thinking, is there a relative scale here? So regardless of that, where I'm going is AI. Now, how do you use NLP to influence how AI thinks, is programmed? Can I make AI feel like I'm at my bottom line because I
Okay.
respond slowly, because I shake my head, the same way I
Okay.
can make a person feel?
Okay. So I'm gonna break this down a little bit. When it comes to practicing, negotiation skills, there is a place you can practice, or a product you can practice with which is AI. All right. Still very limited, but at least it'll give you an idea to perhaps practice some of the questions and see what kind of responses you get. But what you're saying here as well is that you're still not going to get that kind of emotional drawn aspect
From the other side, if I'm using NLP, if I'm using body
so
language.
let me stop you here. So how about this? How about practicing in negotiations with friends?
Okay, so there's a little different dynamic with friends, and it's this: we teach people how to treat us, and we're all creatures of habit.
Yeah.
So friends of mine know certain things about me. I have certain tells, certain things I like, don't like, certain reactions that I have. So they're going to interpret me in a negotiation through the lens of somebody who knows Mike really well, especially in a personal setting, versus a business person who may interact with me once every quarter. We have a quarterly business review, or they've come in for their third presentation, and now they're presenting as a finalist. They're going to have a much more limited experience, but they'll have some experience, versus showing up at a practice session in one of your sessions where the person has never seen me before. I think the lens that those three people have are going to bias how they interpret my negotiation.
Right. Okay. So if you practice with AI, it's very vanilla. It's still gonna be pretty much one way. It's almost like standing in front of a mirror, just saying things, seeing what happens. If you practice with friends, the challenge you got with friends is that they know you. They know you pretty well. You know them pretty well, but you can still practice. Yeah. So practicing with friends is still an option. And in fact, that's what we do. I mean, you did mention something else there in terms of practicing at a club, but I guess there's another place to practice, which is to practice at work, and that's to practice with colleagues. So if you're going to practice with colleagues, I mean, what are your thoughts about that as an arena of practice?
Yeah. So first of all, we like to be collaborative. That's a great thing. I wish all cultures were more collaborative. All the studies show you're a better business when you're collaborative. But at the end of the day, there's only so many promotions out there. There's only so many raises out there. People are competing. So we need to pick our negotiation colleague well. And here's the one danger: is if a whole bunch of salespeople at the same company who do the same things, who are competing, but they do trust each other, they do like each other, they're still in a bubble, an echo chamber, dare I say, of their own company speak, their own value proposition that they're all been told, and they all have the PowerPoint deck, so they all have the same mentality. So when you're practicing your negotiations, you're going to get a limited view. What I tell people is, when I'm doing a negotiation plan or a mini role play, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but what I'm going to say, hey, listen, what if I said this? What if I mentioned payment terms? What if I talked about quality? I want to find someone who resembles the other side of the negotiation. And I don't mean physically resembles. For example, I'm an engineer with a supply chain background. And I think you're also an engineer, right, Phil?
I've done a degree in engineering, but my background is just purely procurement. So yeah.
Okay, but so degree, same. I worked for an engineer for a very small time. Engineering background, degree with a supply chain background. I should not role play with you to close a deal because you're too much like me. I want to find a person who has a similar background to the other side of the negotiation. what culture they're from, where they went to university or what they studied, so that when I negotiate, I'm negotiating with somebody who has more shared experiences with the other side of the table and can give me insight into the way they think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I'll probably just add to that. I think you've got with your colleagues when you're practicing with your colleagues, all right. There's an understanding around what the skills are that you're developing. Okay, with friends, it's not necessarily going to be the same level because they literally could have any sort of viewpoint on it. But with your colleagues, there's an understanding. But then there is then a slightly double-edged sword there that when you're negotiating with your colleagues, there is, I'm going to rephrase it slightly, there's a fear of failure or a fear of looking like you're not particularly
Yeah.
good.
I didn't even talk about the fear that you have of failure.
Yeah, so there's that aspect of that piece, which is, and maybe the top tip from that piece is that if you're going to negotiate with colleagues or practice your negotiation with colleagues, practice on a very inert topic, something where you can make mistakes and not be worried about making really big mistakes, because it's about practicing, and mistakes is really part of it. But the other part about practicing with your colleagues, and you might not have said this, but it's almost like that echo chamber where you're practicing with the people who are like yourself on the same side of the table. So you're also advising, if you're going to practice with colleagues, is perhaps look for people within the business that can represent a different viewpoint, like the other side of the table. So, I mean, most companies, they have a sales force, a sales team. If you're in procurement, how about practicing with a different department who perhaps don't even know you, but would take it from the other side of the table?
I think that's a brilliant observation, Phil. Let me flip it. So if you're in sales and you all got the same PowerPoint deck, you all have the same value proposition, but see, salespeople are competing with each other to get to the next level, to get that commission check, to be the best salesperson in the department. So the feedback you're going to get, is it really going to be honest and transparent from somebody who's technically your competition? I would challenge that. But if you're in, let's say you sell software as a service, okay, big category.
Yeah.
You sell software as a service. That's what your company does. I would think you'd get better feedback finding your procurement department, calling up the chief procurement officer, and the old phone. Right now, it's this, and saying, "Hey, do you mind if I take your software buyer, out to lunch?" Why do you want to take my software buyer out to lunch? Well, I've got this big negotiation with somebody who buys software, and I would like to have a mock negotiation selling our product to your procurement person who buys software. And then the software buyer is going to get insight from the salesperson, and the salesperson is going to get input from the buyer, and they have no relation to competition. They're not going for the same jobs. That may be the key to the best feedback, is within your own company finding somebody else.
Right. So, I mean, feedback is another critical aspect of this, because, you can practice, you can't really practice on your own, maybe with an AI, but AI is not going to give you any feedback. You can practice with friends and colleagues, but if you're doing it as an individual with another individual, the next bit is maybe to have somebody else who's observing for the purposes of giving some feedback as well.
Hey, can we talk about last week's session and feedback? Well, let's just do it. Okay. So I was given the tactic of pause, consider, respond.
Yeah.
Now that is something that I do, but I don't do it as a tactic. But it comes up in negotiations and in meetings that I have. Pause, consider, response. But because I was forced to do it more, I felt very awkward. It just didn't feel natural. I was off. Fred, who observed us, said, "Oh no, I think you looked really natural." Now, whether that was 100% true or not, I did get feedback that whatever I was doing didn't come across as unnatural as I felt. The voice in my head was like, "Oh my God, this is really weird. You're behaving differently. Stop that." But Fred said, "Hey, listen, you did it really well. So now I have more confidence that I can do it more often." So, but getting feedback from somebody, to real feedback. Well, you gave me feedback one time and we disagreed. In one of your practice sessions, you like to use odd numbers. Now, I ended with an odd number. I started with 1,000, then I went to 950, then I went to 937. And you said, well, you didn't use odd numbers. And I said, I did. I used it at the end. And you said, yeah, but you didn't use it at the start. And I said, astute. I wanted to make 937 feel even more powerful than if I started at 972 or some other strange number to start with. So I purposely threw out the 1,000 as it's a throwaway. It's my open and it's not serious. I know it's my open and it's not serious. So I'm gonna take that number and I'm gonna use it to make something later more powerful. But see, it didn't come across that way to you. So
No,
even giving feedback.
I would even go so far as there's different aspects to that I would break down. So yeah, I mean, I would go with we're going off topic here, but I would go with a round number to observe the reaction, then move to the odd numbers. But what I'm getting at, you're right. At the end of the day, if you're going to practice something specifically, I mean, you've just mentioned two things, Rhea, which is one, you can go out and practice a real situation with somebody in your business so that you can build up some sort of knowledge about how to maybe engage on that particular topic. There's another part to this, though, which is actually practicing the skills. So you mentioned pause, consider, respond. You've mentioned odd numbers and other ones as well. Now, when you practice those, it doesn't really matter what the subject matter is. You can practice those skills anyway, but you do need to have somebody else observing in order to do that. That's the key thing here.
Yes. Well, I think two things. I think it's helpful to have a third party who's not in the negotiation and their whole job is just to observe. Because if I'm negotiating with you and expected to give you feedback, I'm doing my own thing. At the same time, I'm trying to think about what feedback I'm going to give you so we can be off a little bit. It's hard to do multiple. Anybody who thinks they're a multitasker is wrong. All the studies show you can't do two things at once. So I do think there's power in just being an observer and giving people feedback. But I'll tell you, there's one other aspect to it. It's the safe environment. A lot of people don't want to criticize their colleagues and their peers, and I don't want to make them feel bad. I mean, I believe if you have spinach on your teeth, everybody deserves to know if you have spinach on your teeth.
But I actually find that's the same with trainers as well. And let me explain. I mean, I do a lot of practice. I do a lot of practice. And I'm not in my head, I'm not afraid to get the cards out and have a go. But I'm also focusing on doing a couple of things within that. But I have noticed sometimes when I've had trainers come onto my workshops, you didn't do this, but there are some trainers who feel potentially threatened, and therefore they'll do some very weird and extreme things, which you wouldn't, to be honest, you would never really see in a negotiation.
You didn't think my thing was weird and extreme? Hi, I'm here from a charity.
Oh, no. I love that because that's part of the creative element to it. And you're not the first one, you're not the last one. There's some bloody weird ones I've had before. Okay. But I think what we're getting at here is that in order to be able to really value the practice, you need to be negotiating with somebody else, potentially somebody who's not necessarily so close to home that it's an echo chamber. And you also need to really have another extra set of eyes and ears. Somebody who's not involved in the negotiations, knows what both parties are trying to achieve, or at least practicing, and they are capable of giving some feedback.
And they have, dare I say, the approval to give honest feedback. So one of the phrases that I've learned to use recently is when I'm in different cultures, there's different, and I hate to stereotype, but there's cultural norms we have to respect. So my British friends tend to be a little more polite, and the Dutch tend to be more direct. Everyone's heard me use that example before. But when I'm negotiating with somebody from the Netherlands, or when I'm working with them, not even negotiating, I have said, allow me to be Dutch. Allow me to be direct. So I'm asking permission to enter their culture, and then I can be direct. So what I'm suggesting is when you're seeking feedback, tell the person that you're seeking the feedback from, you have my full permission to be fully transparent and honest. You will not hurt my feelings, I promise. Now you have to follow through on that. You can't say, well, you hurt my feelings, because now you've broken trust. But give them permission to to give you honest feedback. Otherwise, they're going to say, it was great, Mike. You did a good job. Like, Mike really burned that one. Is that making sense? They have to be.
You know what it does? I have to say now, and I'll say this to the audience, I wasn't entirely sure where this might go about the practicing, but it was unplanned. We talked about AI, we talked about negotiating with friends, we talked about negotiating with colleagues. And in fact, the next one I've got on here is negotiating or practicing at a club. But actually, I think what we've inadvertently done is actually built up the benefits up to actually being in a club. Because if you can actually go to a club to practice, it has pretty much all of the benefits and fewer of the drawbacks of everything that sits underneath it. At a club, and I'm only going to speak from my experience, at a club, you have people that you're not working with every day. So, and they're often from completely different industries, different cultures, different languages. So it's not going to be something that you're familiar with. At the same time, we're not competing with one another. So we're very open and honest. So we get a real opportunity to give feedback.
I still think there's a lot of people who are afraid to be open and honest about their feedback. Even if they're never going to see the person again, they really don't want to say, hey, listen, Mike, what I noticed is your phrasing was awkward or you were too fast. I don't think they want to say that. I think they want to leave quickly and they want to take their feedback that they got and go do something with it. But giving feedback, I don't think a lot of people want to do.
No, but I think
you've seen way more than I have.
Yeah, and I would say that there is a skill to giving feedback as well. You go to any HR department or any kind of interviewing section, they have the skills to be able to observe and don't say anything yet, to give feedback. And I think when you are practicing with your colleagues, there is an aspect of, right, can you really get that feedback? And is there a fear of that? When you get to the level of a club, you are learning, because one of the things I have within my club is you have to give feedback. I nominate people to give feedback. Now, it doesn't mean you can do it very well at the very beginning, but the more you give feedback, the more you start to be able to do it in a manner which you can address issues which maybe are uncomfortable, but you do it by practicing it as well.
So let me answer your question, your topic, and then I'll revert back to what I was going to say.
Yep.
We can get in a loop. We can get in our own echo chamber. I have my own cognitive bias, as do you. But at the end of the day, you and I are looking for these very subtle, very specific things because we've taught negotiations for so long and we've been in the seat for so long. And our experiences are what they are, and we look for those patterns and we try to identify them. Somebody who is a novice negotiator sometimes doesn't even know what to look for to give feedback on.
Absolutely. We've talked about this when it comes to judging. Judging in negotiations, judging negotiation competitions. You often get I think they refer to as a rubrics or a scoring matrix. Yeah. Which is kind of like a person's interpretation of what good looks like and then telling you how to measure it. But I mean, I've said this to you and we've talked about this. There needs to be far more experience in actually observing to give feedback in order to be a judge in a negotiation competition.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That we got to know what to look for, and then we have to know how to grade it. What does good look like while you're looking at it? But what I was going to say before also is there's the sandwich, right? This is the way you give feedback. You tell them something they did good, and then you give them the hard news, and then you close with something they did good. Look, and I just heard somebody it was on television, a program here in the States, say it the other day. Everybody knows the sandwich, and they don't need the sandwich anymore because now it's inauthentic. As soon as your boss says, "Hey, Phil, I want to talk to you about something. I noticed that you did something really well. You really you sent that email really good, but," and then that's what they really called you in for. And then after they've delivered the bad news, they say, "And boy, you're really crushing it with your numbers. I really like that." Or, "I really like the way you talked to Susan the other day." Look, when you follow a pattern that everyone knows is a pattern, it feels inauthentic.
Yeah.
So I think we have to come up with our own authentic way to give constructive feedback And I'm not asking anybody to be hurtful or spiteful or mean, to be professional and polite while you're being honest with the other side. Let me give you an example. Some people getting called into an office. I saw this big internet chat the other day, and I had a counter advice. It said, when your boss sends you the meeting invite that says catching up, bosses need to stop that, because I get anxiety when my boss says that we're catching up and doesn't give me an agenda. And I'm like, they just want to catch up. Well, you don't understand. They could fire me. They could, but they could fake it too. They could say, I want to talk about project A, B, C, and where we are. And then when you get in the office, HR is there and you get fired. So the subject line of the meeting does not matter. The fact that you've had a negative experience with catching up is a specific issue to you. But for instance, as a hiring manager, as a boss, you could go to a person's office and say, hey, listen, I'm going to get some coffee. Let's go for a walk. Will you walk with me? I've got some ideas I want to bounce off you. Whatever it takes to get into a location and an atmosphere of trust is the wrong word. Don't want to overuse it, but low level of anxiety, so then you can be honest with the person. When somebody is anxious, they have a hard time listening to feedback.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up in a couple of minutes because we've had about 30 minutes here. But one of the things you've just kind of said there was, it needs to be, in essence, it needs to be a safe place. People need to be free to make mistakes and not feel as if it's going to come back on them. So if you are going to practice your negotiation skills, it's almost like, what you do in the practice room stays in the practice room, so to speak. Okay. Unless there's a real understanding between what we're trying to achieve here. So, if you are going to practice with your colleagues, maybe not with the friends, but if you're going to practice, I think there should be an element of an agreeable trust between you that, you are there, you can make mistakes. It's about growth, but it's not for you then to take this out of that.
But I like your phrasing. The Fight Club is one of my favorite movies. What happens in practice club stays in practice club.
Yeah.
The first rule of practice club is we don't talk about, we want to talk about practice club because practice is a good thing. It's not a fight.
Yeah.
Negotiations is not a conflict, regardless of what the crisis conflict people say. It doesn't have to be.
So couple of things. All right. So let's wrap this up and just summarize a little bit. All right. I've had 30 minutes there, and I think it's been an interesting progress. So the whole idea is to try to help people to think about how they can practice their negotiation skills. One key element to negotiation is that it's a social it's an interaction. So in order to practice, it needs to have an interaction. We talked about AI, which is possibly not quite there at the moment, but it will do. And there's perhaps elements of practicing with an AI which allow you to do some aspects, allow you to get somewhere. Yeah. You then can practice friends or family. Okay. Although you practice with your daughter and I practice with my lad as well. And that is really hugely insightful as well. It can be really, really beneficial for it as well. But it is an element of an echo chamber. And unless your friends and your family are regularly practicing with you, you're still not going to be able to get necessarily the feedback, but you can still practice. It's still an interaction. There's still aspects of that you can learn. I had a very, very interesting interaction with my wife once when we started negotiating the price of a puppy. She got very angry because she works in a vet's. So we never. That's why I stick with apples. I always stick with apples. Can't get into an argument with apples. Then we talked about, well, okay, there's another environment you can practice in, and that's with your colleagues. And there's two elements to that. One is you can actually practice more subject matter related elements, and you can also practice with people from different parts of your company as well. But you need to make sure that it's a safe place. You've got to ensure it's almost like a HR thing that, this is where you are practicing. Failure is part of practicing. Failure is not.
I add to tell the other person, don't be afraid to be hard on me. Be tough. If we're going to practice, make it a difficult practice. Don't make it easy on me. Challenge me.
Well, feedback. You're talking about you've got to make sure
I'm talking about before the negotiation, but before you're even conducting it, tell the other person, listen, I need for you to make this hard for me. Don't make this easy. Hey, Phil, I need $1,000. 1,000. Oh, my budget's 1,100. Of course you can have 1,000. You're not getting better.
I will agree with you, but I'll also slightly disagree with you in the sense that you are both practicing. So, if one person is going to be harsh, that's absolutely fine. I mean, you can set the scene up exactly like that. Don't be keen, but you're assuming somebody else is going to be like that. But parking that just for a minute. I think the idea of practicing with your colleagues is a very powerful place to practice. But I think if you're going to do it, make sure you've got some of those rules set up. What happens in practice stays in practice, so to speak. Okay. I then think there is that next level of practice opportunity where you look for a club. And if you're a student, normally there's at least some place within a university where there's a club of some sort where you can practice. And if not, look around you. But if you practice at a club, you also then get the value added element to people are learning to give feedback as well. So they are looking specifically for negotiation skills, for tactics being used, for moments in a negotiation. And you're in an ecosystem there where that is part and parcel of what you're coming together with. So I think what you and I just talked about, and again, I've got to say, I wasn't sure that this was going to happen, but we've kind of talked from a low-level practice arena all the way up to which is a really, the epitome of practice arena, which is to do it in a club. Yeah. And guess what? If you then really want to take it to the next level, go in and do a couple of competitions after you've done that. But I would say, don't let any of this stop you practicing. But if you really want to elevate your skills, look for the right place that's going to suit you.
Can I throw one more practice place that's out there?
I'll let you have one.
Okay. So if we expand the definition of negotiating to just trying to get something that has value for you. When I go out to dinner with my wife, especially at a new place, the host will say, "Do you want the bar or the restaurant, the high top, the booth, inside, outside, a binary choice?" And I say, "I would like to sit with the best server." And they say, "What?" I said, "Yeah, the server that trains all the other servers, because if I'm going to pay full price, I want the best experience." See, I'm trying to get something that has value to my side, and so I practice negotiating all the time in my personal life.
Yeah.
Just if there's something that has value to you, don't be afraid to call the manager and say, "Hey, listen, this is a good deal. I'm looking for a great deal. Is there something else you can do?" And get comfortable practicing asking for more than the average person gets. I think gives people courage and confidence when they're actually in a formal negotiation as well.
Again, I'm not going to disagree with them. I think it's taking it out of that practice arena, and you're starting to get into the area of, right, I'm going to try some of this out in real world negotiations, but in a safe, real negotiation. You're not going to go out into your next sort of corporate merger and try things that you've never done before, but you can build up to that. Yeah. Well, you shouldn't, but that's what we're going to. Listen, Mike, I'm going to draw it to an end now. I hope for those of you who do get a chance to maybe listen on that, we've been able to maybe, put a couple of ideas in your head and certainly give you some thoughts about how you can practice your own negotiation skills. And of course, if you want to speak to Mike or myself on this, let me get rid of that so you can got Mike on it. I got other focus ones on here as well. Get rid of that. Where's that? There we go. There we go. Our name's back. So I'm going to leave it at that. We'll have another pop-up discussion at some point. We might even have another pop-up practice negotiation. If anybody actually wants to see some negotiations and see some feedback, keep an eye out for the channel, both on LinkedIn and on YouTube. And obviously, if you want to follow Mike and myself, if you haven't already done it, certainly do that as well. You'll find out that Mike certainly comments a lot and has a lot of great ideas, and I'm of the same as well. So
I poke bears.
He pokes bears. I run from them. So on that note, Mike, should we say goodbye?
Goodbye. Hey, Phil, it's been a pleasure as always. Thanks, my friend.
All right. See you all. Take care. And now I've got to work out how to switch this off. Hang on a second. All right.